this is what the end result is.
We don't have enough nurses for these patients.
I can't breathe! George Floyd!
I paid $27 million.
Show us your tax return.
Stop the steal! Stop the steal!
The first American president ever to be impeached twice.
Donald Trump, at the end of 3 years as US president, had a fair bit of reason to be confident about the position he was in. His popularity had been pretty low. It was bubbling down in the high 30s at the time, but that's not tragic for a US president. Most expect at the end of the third year of their first term in office that popularity will be pretty low, but most can expect it to pick up in the final year. And Donald Trump specifically had a reason for optimism as 2020 began, and that is that the US economy was doing well. In fact, it was on its longest run of growth ever recorded, right through pretty much the Barack Obama period and all of Donald Trump's presidency. So he had good reason to figure that he was in a pretty good position running into 2020. Of course, 2020 was no ordinary year, and that was going to change things quickly and quite drastically.
In the picturesque Swiss Alps, an impeached president now officially on trial back home.
That whole thing is a hoax. It goes nowhere because nothing happened. The only thing we've done is a great job.
Donald Trump at a World Economic Forum more focused on reigniting a feud with climate activists, notably teenager Greta Thunberg, in the room together for the first time since this moment last year.
To embrace the possibilities of tomorrow, we must reject the perennial prophets of doom and their predictions of the apocalypse.
Our house is still on fire. Your inaction is fueling the flames by the hour.
6,000 kilometres from Davos, Washington, D.C.
To keep silent on pain of imprisonment.
Impeachment trial day one spent debating the ground rules for just the third hearing of this gravity in US history.
A trial without evidence is not a trial. It's a cover-up.
It's outrageous. And the American people won't stand for it, I'll tell you that right now. They're not here to steal one election, they're here to steal two elections.
This Senate, like America, is bitterly divided over impeachment, but they won't be able to show it. The 100 senators will have to sit in silence throughout the duration of the trial. No discussions, no mobile phones, just like a jury. A historic trial airing a well-worn narrative, live and late into the night. On the world stage with a domestic battle front and centre.
We have a great case.
Donald Trump wrapped up his Switzerland trip railing against Democrats trying to have him removed from office.
Gerald Nadler, I've known him a long time. He's a sleazebag.
Will you show up at your trial any day?
I'd love to go. Wouldn't that be great? Wouldn't that be beautiful? I don't know. I'd sort of love to sit right in the front row and stare at their corrupt faces.
Democrats still pushing to call witnesses, including former National Security Advisor John Bolton. Trump suggesting he could use executive privilege to stop it.
I don't know if we left on the best of the terms. I would say probably not. I thought our team did a very good job, but honestly, we have all the material. They don't have the material.
Indeed, they do have the material hidden from the American people. That is nothing to brag about.
Day two of the trial opened with a prayer for civility before Democrats laid out their case.
He directed the actions of his team. He personally asked a foreign government to investigate his opponent. These facts are not in dispute.
Never before has an impeached president actually been removed from office in this process, and it's unlikely this time. Republicans who control the Senate are so far steadfast in their support for Donald Trump.
They're on a crusade to destroy this man, and they don't care what they destroy in the process of trying to destroy Donald Trump.
Donald Trump back on home soil to take up his own fight.
I spent 16 years working in Canberra in Parliament House, covering politics there, in particular the overseas missions and foreign visits by 5 of our prime ministers, and then came to the United States in 2020, specifically then to cover the election and stay on as a US correspondent, and I've been here ever since. The striking thing about Donald Trump is he took a trend of polarisation and he accelerated it. That is, the public had very firm views on Donald Trump from the start. They loved him or they hated him. There'd never really been a figure in US presidential politics as polarising as Donald Trump. He was the first US president in 2016 to come to the White House with no political or military background to speak of. So he brought a particular style and a particular background to the White House, and right at the core of that was that he was going to be disruptive. So whenever Donald Trump generated controversy as president, and he did that pretty regularly, his supporters would see it as an affirmation that he was doing the job that they wanted him to do, that he was upsetting the establishment, that he was scattering the chips of politics, if you like, making it different, cleaning out Washington as he'd promised to do. And for that reason, although his popularity numbers weren't great by the beginning of that 4th year, the beginning of 2020, his base was quite solid.
He was the president's national security advisor until just a few months ago. And now John Bolton, a long-time foreign policy hawk and maverick Washington insider, may be about to turn on his former boss. Extracts from his soon-to-be-published memoir could destroy the very heart of President Trump's defense in his impeachment trial. Most ominously for the White House, moderate Republican senators now want him as a witness, and the party's legendary unity is cracking.
I think it's increasingly likely that other Republicans will join those of us who think we should hear from John Bolton.
Bolton appears to have the crown jewels for investigators, unambiguous first-person evidence that President Trump was withholding military aid to Ukraine until President Zelensky launched a corruption investigation into Joe Biden's son. The former vice president is a possible rival in the 2020 campaign. To Democrats, this changes everything.
This is stunning. It goes right to the heart of the charges against the president. Ambassador Bolton essentially confirms the president committed the offenses charged in the first article of impeachment.
Alongside the visiting Israeli prime minister, the president said he had no knowledge of the book or its contents.
Nothing was ever said to John Bolton, but I have not seen a manuscript. I guess he's writing a book. I have not seen it.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
He then brushed aside all questions as the Senate trial becomes a far more unpredictable affair than anticipated.
Back in the House that impeached him.
The President of the United States!
Refusing to take the hand of the Speaker he hasn't spoken to in months. Donald Trump updated America on the state of its union.
Our union is stronger than ever before.
Addressing a clearly divided joint sitting of Congress. The president touted economic achievements while taunting Democrats who tried to force him from office.
We must always remember that our job is to put America first.
Just the second president to deliver the speech under the shadow of an impeachment trial, Trump staged an early victory lap.
The only victories that matter in Washington are victories that deliver for the American people.
While at the end, Nancy Pelosi sent her own message about the speech. In Washington, D.C., Paul Kadak, 7 News.
Well, I was reporting in the United States for what would be the last couple of years of the Trump presidency, but also the start of the COVID pandemic. Well, we knew 2020 was going to be a crucial year, a busy year. It was going to be the election year. Now, Donald Trump and his team were confident the economy was going to be their ticket to a big win. There'd been plenty of division. There'd been plenty of fights with the Democrats after the Democrats took control of Congress, but they were confident they had a good message. But little did they know what was about to hit them and was about to hit the world.
For just the third time in history, the US Senate decided whether a president should be removed from office.
The Senate is now ready to vote on the articles of impeachment.
The 100 votes falling along party lines until they didn't.
Mr. Romney, guilty.
Republican Mitt Romney breaking ranks.
What the president did was wrong, grievously wrong.
Choosing conscience over party, declaring the president guilty of abuse of power.
I'm sure to hear abuse from the president and his supporters.
It's already happened.
Slick, slippery, stealthy. Mitt Romney had us fooled.
But his vote still brought the Democrats nowhere near the two-thirds majority needed to convict.
It is therefore ordered and adjudged that the said Donald John Trump be, and he is hereby, acquitted of the charges in said articles.
So, as expected, Donald Trump remains in residence here at the White House as the impeachment process ends as it began, with Republicans and Democrats bitterly divided over his actions and his fitness to be president. If Washington could agree on anything today, it's that the American people will now decide his fate when they vote in November. The president celebrating by tweeting an old video suggesting he's here to stay forever, before announcing he'll address the nation tomorrow to discuss our country's victory on the impeachment hoax. The Trump impeachment, like so much of what was going on in America at this time, really showed that these were the divided states of America. Trump's supporters were rock solid. They believed him when he said it was a hoax, there was nothing to see, it was a witch hunt on the Democrats' part. And for Democrat supporters, they're saying, well, Trump is clearly someone who needs to be investigated, he's someone who needs to be impeached. So after 4 months of these hearings, it was all over in half an hour. Mitt Romney was, I think, the only Republican who actually voted for impeachment. They couldn't get the two-thirds they needed in the Senate. They were never going to get that, and so the impeachment failed in the Senate, as expected. And Trump was ecstatic. He took a victory lap the next day. He was doing a big press conference for the nation. He held up a copy of the daily paper saying Trump acquitted, and he brandished that at several events that day. And he was emboldened, and this was his message. He said, well, I told you it was a hoax, I told you it was a witch hunt, and I'm now proven to be right. Donald Trump, acquitted, unleashed, uncensored.
It was all bull.
After a 5-month campaign to have him removed from office,
we went through hell unfairly, did nothing wrong. This is what the end result is. You could take that home, honey, maybe we'll frame it.
relishing the end of his impeachment trial with a 62-minute verbal victory lap.
It was evil, it was corrupt, it was dirty cops, it was leakers and liars. And this should never, ever happen to another president.
It was presidential fanfare straight into political warfare here at the White House, with no attempt to heal the deep divide in Washington, a sure sign of the bitter election battle still to come.
Democrat Speaker Nancy Pelosi in no mood to reconcile at a prayer breakfast, face-to-face for the first time since this moment.
Nor do I like people who say, I pray for you, when they know that that's not so.
He has shredded the truth in his speech. He's shredding the Constitution in his conduct. I shredded his state of his mind address.
Hours before the polls open for the Democrats' primary vote,
hello, Manchester.
The Trump show rolled into town.
We are going to defeat the radical socialist Democrats. We are going to win New Hampshire in a landslide.
He narrowly lost to Hillary Clinton here in 2016. Tonight, Donald Trump was back to take the spotlight and the state.
How could I not attend a rally seeing my hero, Donald Trump, in my own hometown?
Impeached, acquitted, and emboldened.
We have the highest poll numbers that we have ever had. Thank you, Nancy, very much. Thank you.
Seizing on his opponent's bungled vote in Iowa last week.
The Democrat Party wants to run your health care, but they can't even run a caucus in Iowa.
After the debacle of the Iowa caucuses, and with so many candidates still in contention, the primary vote here in New Hampshire has extra significance for the Democrat hopefuls, sorting out who has the momentum and who's fading fast. New polling puts Senator Bernie Sanders in the lead for the first time in the national race with 25% of the vote. Biden dropping back to 17%. Mike Bloomberg surged to 15%, followed by Elizabeth Warren and Iowa winner Pete Buttigieg. A clear leader and a pack chasing.
As we went into 2020, obviously the build-up to the election was already underway, and as it works in the American system, Donald Trump's support was rock solid among Republicans. There was no serious contender against him, which is not unusual for a sitting president, that he was going to be the nominee for the Republicans again. But the Democrats had to choose someone, and so, as the Americans do, they have to pick their candidate, and what happens is that there are months of the different candidates basically trying to tear each other down to become the candidate. So they effectively have to attack each other to actually become the candidate. So we had that going on for several months. And one of the clear early leaders was Bernie Sanders, who has been around a very long time, a self-confessed socialist, a reformer. He had some big ideas, and he was leading very early on. Bernie Sanders, I think to a lot of people, he comes across as authentic. He's been very consistent. He doesn't flip-flop. He's very consistent with what he said, calling for reform of healthcare, of how corporations behave in America. And that seemed to be something that really caught on. And it kind of symbolized what was going on in the Democratic Party. There were the progressives like Bernie Sanders, like Elizabeth Warren, who were saying we need to make changes, this is a time for reform, and make big changes. But then there were the moderates like Joe Biden, like Pete Buttigieg, like Amy Klobuchar, who's saying, well, first of all, we need to beat Donald Trump. At one point, it seemed that the Democrats may tear each other apart, and if they wanted to beat Donald Trump, their division wasn't going to achieve that.
Even for the 9th richest man in the world,
Mayor Michael Bloomberg.
money couldn't buy love on this stage.
A billionaire who calls women fat broads and horse-faced lesbians. And no, I'm not talking about Donald Trump. I'm talking about Mayor Bloomberg. Democrats.
Minutes in, a bare-knuckle brawl.
I don't think there's any chance of the senator beating President Trump.
The former New York mayor made his debate debut in Las Vegas, having gambled more than $500 million on his presidential campaign.
We shouldn't have to choose between one candidate who wants to burn this party down and another candidate who wants to buy this party out.
Under siege over his treatment of women.
Mr. Mayor, are you willing to release all of those women from those non-disclosure agreements so we can hear their side of the story?
We have a very few non-disclosure agreements.
How many is that?
Let me finish.
How many is that?
None of them accuse me of doing anything other than maybe they didn't like the joke I told. And let me point.
Reveling in the carnage one state over.
And now they have a new member of the crew, Mini Mike. And I hear he's getting pounded tonight.
President Trump on the West Coast running a counter-campaign and lining his war chest.
Looking for a jackpot in Las Vegas.
Feels great. We're really encouraged.
Presidential hopefuls spun into Sin City.
This is what it's all about.
The third chance for Democrats to vote for their candidate and the first caucus since the Iowa embarrassment.
Our first goal is to get it right.
Soon it was clear Bernie Sanders had the strongest hand.
We have now won the Nevada caucus.
Raking in delegates in his second early state victory, just a day after senior intelligence officials revealed Russian operatives were working to secure his nomination.
The president gets very, very upset easily, so don't tell him.
With the senator coming up trumps, the president piped up. Looks like Crazy Bernie is doing well in the great state of Nevada. Biden and the rest look weak.
Let's give Trump exactly what he doesn't want. Let's give him you and Joe Biden as the nominee.
The former vice president resisting the bait.
I beat him by going to just moving on.
Move on they will to the South Carolina primary next weekend.
From there we go to Super Tuesday, and 1/3 of America is going to be voting.
Meaning for candidates, there's still plenty left on the table. In the United States, Amelia Brace, 7 News.
I was there basically for Trump's entire first presidency. So I was there for 4 years from the start of 2017. So I don't think life under Trump was ever calm. He was just surrounded by scandal. You have to remember that he was impeached, something that we forget now when speaking about him, because there was just so much going on in terms of the investigation into his alleged collusion with Russia. There was the hush money scandal, which we're still seeing playing out now. There was plenty going on throughout those years, but then at the start of 2020, it really escalated. It was extraordinary to not just cover. As a journalist, I would always say that Trump's good for news because there was just constantly something to speak about. But to live through, I lived in Trump's America, and it was amazing to see how society changed under him, and not necessarily just for the worse. A lot of people considered themselves to be very financially better off. Jobs numbers improved, obviously, until 2020. He had a war with Kim Jong-un and then made friends with him with the weirdest handshake we've ever seen. It never ended, the news value of this president. It was really extraordinary.
The unlikely campaign from the unknown candidate is over.
So tonight, I am making the difficult decision to suspend my campaign for the presidency.
Pete Buttigieg, a 38-year-old millennial mayor, Afghanistan war veteran, the first openly gay candidate to be a serious contender.
The truth is that the path has narrowed to a close.
Despite celebrity endorsement and early win in Iowa.
Mr. Mayor, how confident are you tonight?
Very strong, and we'll see the numbers coming in soon.
It wasn't enough. He couldn't win over minority voters, and a fourth-place finish in the South Carolina primary yesterday sealed his fate. He had an early breakfast with former President Jimmy Carter, then rallied supporters. The timing critical, just 2 days before 14 states vote on a Democratic nominee in America's Super Tuesday. Pete Buttigieg's campaign was praised by his Democrat rivals as inspiring, history-making, but its end helps them all. The question now is, in a slimmed-down field, where do his votes go? Bernie Sanders remains the frontrunner, but now Joe Biden could position himself as the new moderate alternative to socialist Sanders. Donald Trump predicting this is the real beginning of the Dems taking Bernie out of play, no nomination again. On the biggest polling day before November's election,
it's always an exciting and a hopeful time.
5 candidates were vying for the votes of Democrats in 14 states. A crucial clash between progressive frontrunner Bernie Sanders
How are you doing?
Good.
and the moderates trying to stop him.
We are not only taking on the corporate establishment, we're taking on the political establishment.
Former Vice President Joe Biden drawing first blood.
But it feels good, and we're feeling optimistic.
Staging a southern sweep.
Joe Biden will win.
Setting the scene for a Super Tuesday surprise.
It's a good night, and it seems to be getting even better.
But there was a Sanders resurgence in delegate-rich Texas, the biggest prize, California, also appearing to go Bernie's way. The biggest loser, Mike Bloomberg, taking only American Samoa after spending more than $500 million campaigning.
Joe Biden needed to prove tonight that he's still in this race, and he's done that, but with no overwhelming winner, this Super Tuesday has simply shown the battle to be the Democratic nominee for president isn't over yet.
Whoever it is, I don't care. I really don't care. Whoever it is, we will take him on.
The president and the nation watching and waiting.
People either loved him or loved to hate him. And I don't think that's just Trump. Americans are much more polarized in their politics than we are. People are either a Democrat or a Republican, and you hear very few who are in between or undecided or are not willing to tell you about what they believe in and why they're right and you're wrong. So Trump just gave them either a target or a hero, and people really backed him in or worked against him, and it just created this real powder keg of a country where everything felt incredibly volatile.
A billionaire bid for the White House goes bust.
I knew we didn't have much of a chance, but we did it anyways.
Spending close to $1 billion on a campaign that won him just American Samoa.
One thing this whole thing has shown, that you can't buy an election. It's a beautiful thing.
But Mike Bloomberg pledged to keep his checkbook open for Joe Biden.
I hope you will join me in working to make him the next president of the United States of America.
Supercharged after his Super Tuesday success, with Bernie Sanders now his only real rival to take on Donald Trump.
What we can't let happen in the next few weeks is let this primary turn into a campaign of negative attacks.
And I do not want this campaign to degenerate.
After her dismal Super Tuesday performance, Elizabeth Warren is now deciding the future of her campaign under pressure to drop out and endorse fellow progressive Bernie Sanders before the next state's vote next week.
Her supporters still cheering, but Elizabeth Warren was stepping down.
I will not be running for president in 2020, but I guarantee I will stay in the fight.
Last year, she briefly led the polls, known for detailed ideas on healthcare, education,
And I got a plan for that.
and confronting her fellow candidates.
A billionaire who calls women fat broads and horse-faced lesbians. And no, I'm not talking about Donald Trump. I'm talking about Mayor Bloomberg. I think you called me a liar on national TV.
But voters didn't respond in the primaries. On Super Tuesday, she lost her home state, Massachusetts. Crucially, she did not endorse either Joe Biden or Bernie Sanders today. Sanders telling her supporters he's their new home. The once diverse Democratic field losing its last woman with a real shot, now left with two white men in their late 70s.
One of the hardest parts of this is all those little girls who are going to have to wait 4 more years.
The race was very interesting. Pete Buttigieg won one of the primaries. Bernie Sanders had won and primaries. But as things moved on, and as we led up to Super Tuesday, when a great many states cast their votes, and that's usually the one that says this is where people are thinking, Bernie Sanders was still a favourite. But by then, some of the other candidates who had got a lot of attention had dropped out. Pete Buttigieg dropped out. He endorsed Joe Biden. Amy Klobuchar dropped out. She endorsed Joe Biden. And so it was sort of as that point that Joe Biden was starting to get the momentum. He was starting to do well in the primaries. And where the Democrats had sort of been wrestling with, are we going to go progressive or are we going to go moderate? I think it started coalescing around the idea is that we need to beat Donald Trump. And I think what people were discovering or deciding was that Joe Biden, being moderate, being the safe pair of hands, polling well among minority voters in the US, seemed to be the candidate who could beat Donald Trump. And in the end, he was the one who triumphed over Senator Bernie Sanders.
President Trump,
My fellow Americans,
addresses the nation with a plan to halt a runaway train.
we will be suspending all travel from Europe to the United States for the next 30 days.
Just over 48 hours notice for passengers. The ban does not include the UK or trade and goods, and there will be exemptions for US citizens.
Older Americans should also avoid non-essential travel.
Financial stimulus is coming. Plans for low-interest loans, deferred tax payments and payroll tax relief.
The virus will not have a chance against us.
Doctors predict it could infect 150 million Americans. And there are concerns for the president's own health.
I am confident that by counting and continuing,
Closures are moving fast. Team owners finding out mid-game the NBA season is suspended.
This seemed more like out of a movie than reality.
A Utah player tested positive. In Italy, the national address came via Facebook. Its Prime Minister now ordering all non-essential shops to shut down. Globally, it's a domino effect. Hungary in a state of emergency. Germany warning 70% of people could be infected. In Denmark, all schools are closed. Classrooms also shut in Peru. Canada, $1 billion plan to save the economy. And in Iran, their vice president now has the virus. Washington state banning anything with more than 250 people.
The penalties are you might be killing your granddad if you don't do it.
Both he and his administration tried to downplay the seriousness of the virus. Of course, you have to give him grace that at the start we didn't know how bad it would be. It hit America much earlier than Australia, when Australia had had a chance to watch the rest of the world affected. By the time it got to New York, really, it was just China and maybe Italy that we were seeing these cases. We didn't quite know how bad it was. It was scary. But a lot of people liked that Trump was downplaying it. It was reassuring. It's what they wanted to hear. And if there's one thing we know about him being a populist, he likes to say what people want to hear.
The cascade of closures happened at a breathtaking rate.
Cannot be gathered together We cannot be in close proximity to each other.
These are our parents, our grandparents, our neighbors, our coworkers, and the action you take or don't take could decide the fate of their lives.
Across America, restrictions on gatherings forcing Disneyland and Universal Studios to shut their gates for the first time since 9/11.
To see Disney shut down is, just mind-blowing.
We had a choice out of going to France or here, and we thought we'd stay ahead of the coronavirus, so we came here first.
In New York, Broadway, which has defied wars and recessions to keep the lights on, shuttered, plays and musicals suspended for 32 days.
If you bought them here, we can refund them here.
There is a lot of anxiety amongst the theatre community around what it means for their livelihoods.
Anxiety too on Wall Street, Donald Trump's overnight address.
My fellow Americans.
Doing little to calm a nation's nerves, a travel ban angering European allies as it emerged he too came in contact with a coronavirus patient, a Brazilian official seen beside the president at Mar-a-Lago just days ago. The virus putting Canada's Prime Minister in lockdown, his wife tonight testing positive. Crippling almost every professional sports league. Basketball, baseball, hockey and soccer seasons over. Cruises too. Princess halting operations of its 18 ships globally for 2 months as the world wades into a crisis uncharted.
Ushering America into a new phase of a global crisis.
I am officially declaring a national emergency.
President Trump unlocking $80 billion to fight coronavirus as he faces questions over his own health.
I didn't say I wasn't going to be tested.
Are you going to be?
Most likely, yeah.
The town of New Rochelle opened drive-through testing under the eyes of the National Guard. In Manhattan, a new reality, eerily empty theatres, wary crowds in Times Square.
Why are you wearing the mask?
For my protection.
I think it's going to spread regardless. It's just a way to slow down the spread so that hospitals don't get all packed.
But there's growing frustration over a shortage of test kits.
I hope it's just a cold. I would love to do the corona test, but there just isn't one here.
To those families and citizens who are worried and concerned for themselves and their loved ones, I want you to know that your federal government will unleash every authority, resource and tool at its disposal.
The emergency declaration is clearly what the markets wanted to hear. While Donald Trump was speaking here on Wall Street, the Dow Jones was soaring, almost making up for yesterday's biggest drop since the 1987 crash, but still ending the week well down on where it began.
Chaos continuing at supermarkets and airports as the president's travel ban on Europe kicked in. Amongst the darkness, a final day of joy at Disneyland.
It was fun, but you can tell that the atmosphere is kind of different.
The year's sporting calendar in limbo, the Masters and Boston Marathon postponed, the president declaring Sunday a national day of prayer. Presidential precautions before a White House briefing on the virus, temperature checks that no one in the room showed symptoms. Donald Trump finding out for sure.
I also took the test last night, yeah.
He got the all clear from doctors, but still faced scrutiny for ignoring advice to stop shaking hands.
Just relax. People come up to me, they shake hands, they put their hand out. It's sort of a natural reflex. Shaking hands is not a great thing to be doing right now, I agree.
The US expanding its Europe travel ban to include all foreigners from the UK and Ireland, returning Americans facing massive queues for screening.
We're probably a week or two away from this really becoming a major epidemic across the entire nation.
The Pentagon even stopping its personnel travelling within the United States.
Well, if you don't have to travel, I wouldn't do it.
In Aspen, Colorado, 13 Australians remain in lockdown, 10 positive for COVID-19, 3 refusing to be tested. Friend Marsha Griffin says she's lucky not to be infected.
I arrived just a little after their parties happened, so as much as I would have loved to have been at their parties, I'm very glad in this instance that I wasn't there. But I am worried for my friends because they've been locked up for a week.
Are you here to get tested?
There have been long lines at the few drive-through testing stations set up so far.
We will see more cases and we will see more suffering and death.
In virus-hit Seattle, hospitals already under strain.
They're already starting to ration supplies here. There just isn't enough to keep going for very long.
With warnings of virus testing scams after suspected fake test kits were seized in Los Angeles.
Here in New York, 2 firefighters have now tested positive for coronavirus, and it means around 100 of their colleagues have had to go into isolation. It highlights a challenge for authorities how to keep a city safe if a growing number of firefighters, paramedics, police officers have to go into quarantine. Church services have been cancelled, major retailers like Apple closing.
Just coming in, you can hear it's like eerily quiet. There's people around, but there's not many people around.
As supermarket staff deal with panic buying and aggression in the aisles.
As human beings, we gotta come together at a time like this. So I need you guys to calm down.
8 days after shutting down his country, Donald Trump hinted he might open it again.
Our country wasn't built to be shut down.
The president losing patience with social distancing and the effect it's having on the economy.
We're not going to let the cure be worse than the problem. This was a medical problem. We are not going to let it turn into a long-lasting financial problem.
Saying he'll soon announce a date restrictions will be wound back.
We have to get open and we have to get moving. You can't keep it closed for the next, for years. Okay, this is going away.
As his experts warn, it's not.
I want America to understand this week it's going to get bad.
We're trying to make it so that it's much, much less bad.
Grand Central Station normally packed, but this is what New York's new rush hour looks like. Even with people staying at home, the number of confirmed infections continues to rise, with more than 1 in 10 COVID-19 cases around the world now here in the United States.
Hotspots bracing for the worst as the nation notched up 100 deaths in a 24-hour period for the first time, the surge bringing the national death toll to more than 500.
Battling an invisible enemy at home.
We're going to have a couple of weeks, starting pretty much now, but especially a few days from now, that are going to be horrific.
Donald Trump is now pointing the finger abroad.
I'm not an accountant from China.
The president publicly accusing China of misleading the world on the early extent of COVID-19.
Their numbers seem to be a little bit on the light side. And I'm being nice when I say that.
The White House briefed by US intelligence agencies that Beijing underreported both cases and deaths, robbing other nations of valuable early information.
Long before the world learned in December that China was dealing with this, and maybe as much as a month earlier than that the outbreak was real in China.
China's official reporting suggests just over 82,000 cases, with 3,300 deaths, numbers no longer rapidly rising. Compare that to the US, confirming more than 215,000 cases and more than 5,000 fatalities.
We could have been better off if China had been more forthcoming.
The tide of infections has prompted more states to issue stay-at-home orders. But with 9 out of 10 Americans already on lockdown, Donald Trump says he is considering some domestic air restrictions to help stem the spread.
But closing up every single flight on every single airline, that's a very, very, very rough decision. But we are thinking about hot spots where you go from spot to spot, both hot.
Now including Florida, its governor blaming February's Super Bowl for a rapid spread.
It was very clear from the early days that he intended to blame China. He called it the China virus repeatedly, despite being encouraged not to, because it was causing racism and Asian Americans were being targeted in the street. I think for him it was a way to deflect blame from himself, not that he was ever to blame for COVID, obviously, but for his handling of it, to say that this isn't my fault, it's China's fault. He also repeatedly said it's something we could never have expected or prepared for, even though health experts were saying that in fact it's something that the government was warned of with SARS and other viruses in the years prior. He did repeatedly, constantly bring it back to China as a way, I think, to push the blame from himself.
With his sights set on recovery, Donald Trump met those who've recovered.
They're very brave. Some were right at the edge. They thought it was over.
Hosting COVID-19 survivors at the White House.
How are you now?
I'm great.
Would you say 100%?
I would say 85.
Stay away from me, please. Stay away. Keep her away.
As he further distanced himself from the World Health Organization.
Today I'm instructing my administration to halt funding of the World Health Organization,
accusing the global body of mismanaging the coronavirus crisis by pushing Chinese misinformation, leading to a 20-fold increase in cases worldwide.
Those tasked with protecting us by being truthful and transparent failed to do so.
The coronavirus toll continues to soar in the United States. The country has now seen more than 26,000 lives lost, with a big spike today here in New York City. Authorities revising the death toll up more than 3,700 as they now include people who died before they could be tested.
In California, 7 crew on board the Navy hospital ship Mercy have tested positive. But as America's curve continues to flatten, the president faced a backlash over his declaration he will decide when each state reopens.
When somebody's the president of the United States, the authority is total.
Do we want a king or do we want a president? And we opted for a president. So that statement cannot stand. Period.
Donald Trump now says the decision will be left to governors and that some will make it before the end of the month. Spring and talk of warmer weather as a virus weapon.
I hope people enjoy the sun, and if it has an impact, that's great.
Homeland Security lab results matching other research suggesting heat, humidity and direct sunlight kills coronavirus more quickly.
Supposing we hit the body with a tremendous, whether it's ultraviolet or just very powerful light. Relative to this virus?
That is a treatment.
Experiments showed
bleach will kill the virus in 5 minutes. Isopropyl alcohol will kill the virus in 30 seconds.
Prompting this from the president.
And then I see the disinfectant, where it knocks it out in a minute, 1 minute. And is there a way we can do something like that by injection inside or almost a cleaning?
I would caution against the injection of disinfection.
Little sunshine for American workers, the unemployment line growing by another 4.4 million people this week, 26 million now jobless due to coronavirus. Protected politicians voting nearly $800 billion in additional emergency aid.
Finally, help is on the way.
More evidence today. The number of cases we know about could just be the tip of the iceberg. First results from the testing of 3,000 New Yorkers for COVID-19 antibodies has found 1 in 7 of them had been exposed to the virus. That would work out to 2.7 million people having had it just in this state, the equivalent of the number of currently known cases around the world.
He definitely had a focus on reopening the economy. He was very worried about things like unemployment going through the roof, given that was something that he had built his presidency on. He was incredibly proud of what he'd done to the economy. In saying that, he still stood up every day with the health advisors, similar to what we saw here. He regularly disagreed with them right in front of them. I'm sure you remember Dr. Anthony Fauci. They were at war in front of our cameras every day. It was incredible to watch, especially the day Trump just thought out loud whether you could perhaps ingest disinfectant to treat COVID. And people were immediately clarifying on every news program all over Twitter saying, do not do that. Not only will it not help COVID, you could seriously hurt yourself. When he said it though, you could see the thought bubble. It wasn't something that he'd come in saying, I'm going to tell people to do this. He was just thinking out loud, which is what he did in press conferences. Not intending to be dangerous or malicious or to give people the wrong information, but by thinking out loud in a health crisis, you inadvertently say things that can be really dangerous.
Clarifying his comments in the Oval Office.
I was asking a very sarcastic question.
Donald Trump claimed he was joking when he said this.
And then I see the disinfectant, where it knocks it out in a minute, 1 minute. And is there a way we can do something like that by injection inside? I was asking a question sarcastically to reporters like you, just to see what would happen.
What did happen was widespread backlash.
The president is not listening to medical experts, and I don't know which ones he is listening to, if any.
The manufacturer of Dettol even releasing a statement saying under no circumstance should its products be administered into the human body.
I think he just saw the information at the time, immediately before the press conference, and he was still digesting that information.
Coronavirus is everywhere here in New York, and so is the hunger. With millions out of work, lines at food banks like this one have never been longer. The need never greater. 13-year-old Saul Flores queuing outside his own school.
In school, they teach us about epidemics and stuff like that, and then living in one is really terrifying.
Collecting food for his family out of work and quarantining at home.
We're getting worried about how much, if it's going to be enough.
In Atlanta, the lines were at the Speedway. Georgia, one of 3 states cautiously joining the race to reopen.
After weeks at the lectern,
Thank you very much, everyone.
Donald Trump skipped his daily briefing, explaining his absence on Twitter. What is the purpose of having White House news conferences when the lamestream media asks nothing but hostile questions and then refuses to report the truth or facts accurately? Not worth the time and effort. There are suggestions the White House might scale back news conferences after the president questioned injecting disinfectant as a coronavirus treatment.
I would suggest the media not take him out of context. I think this president has consistently said from the beginning that people should consult with their doctors.
They're warning of another grim American milestone, almost 1 million cases of COVID-19, a quarter of the world's deaths, with more than 53,000 lives lost. Still, the nation is slowly reopening. New York's governor planning a brief excursion.
Get out of the house, hike until they are fatigued and exhausted, because exhaustion is our friend.
Californians are countering a heat wave in the waves as temperatures hit the mid-30s.
I wanted to get my feet in the water, but it seems kind of early to me.
For those who couldn't make it to the beach, the city set up so-called cooling centres, air-conditioned town halls where those on lockdown could safely escape the heat.
It's kind of hard to stay inside. It's very tempting to get out of the house.
And tempting to let safety measures slide.
When you put your mask on, it's just it's hot, it's hard to breathe.
Defiant and demanding the lockdown ends now.
Freedom and liberty. We're losing it.
Close to 1,000 Americans gather outside the house of Minnesota's governor. No masks, no distance, in a united mutiny over restrictions they say are killing their livelihoods.
Don't tread on us, we're the taxpayers.
Across the country, the same cry.
Everybody come back May 1st.
They have support from Washington. In multiple tweets, President Trump called for states to liberate.
And if you look at some of the states you just mentioned, it's too tough.
A day after announcing the states would call the shots on when to reopen.
This is just grossly irresponsible, and it is dangerously bombastic because it inspires people to do dangerous things.
These are people expressing their views. I see where they are and I see the way they're working. They seem to be very responsible people to me.
Today's protest came as the nation recorded yet another record death toll. More than 4,500 lives lost in just 24 hours. That's almost double the previous peak. But Donald Trump claims a vocal governor is ungrateful for federal assistance.
But I'm saying thank you for doing your job.
Telling Andrew Cuomo to spend more time doing and less time complaining.
If he's sitting home watching TV, maybe he should get up and go to work, right?
Mutiny in Michigan. Armed with flags and guns, protesters storm their state capitol building, demanding access as leaders debated extending the emergency lockdown. Police blocked the entry, but eventually angry voters made it in, standing in the gallery with rifles as members below, some wearing bulletproof vests, voted against keeping people at home any longer. Their president says he's seen the evidence of where this crisis began inside a Wuhan lab.
Yes, I have. Yes, I have. We should have the answer to that in the not-too-distant future, and that will determine a lot how I feel about China.
In New York, they're focused on containing the horror still unfolding. Unrefrigerated trucks containing 60 or more bodies found outside a Brooklyn funeral home after neighbours complained about a foul smell.
People loading bodies on it constantly all day.
It's a shame. These are people's family members.
This truly awful discovery here, a sign of the strain on New York's funeral homes right now, with more than 17,000 lives lost to the coronavirus in the city. Some places say they've seen more demand in the last month than they normally get in a year.
Why on earth did they not either alert the state, who regulate them, or go to their NYPD, do something?
An investigation underway, but no charges have been laid.
Huntington Beach, California, mid-pandemic.
Open our economy! You're in the sunshine, you're in fresh air, you're healthier than wearing a mask.
Crowds spill onto the road, restless, infuriated over business and beach shutdowns.
Hopefully it won't get to the point where we need to put down the signs and flags and pick up weapons, but that's what we have the Second Amendment for.
Inside this blue state rally, we meet Trump loyalists.
Are you concerned by the health risks of gathering together in a large group out here today?
No, not really. No, it's the sunshine, that kills the virus, I think.
And skeptics.
My children are not at risk because they have an immune system.
Would you give your children a coronavirus vaccine?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Not ever.
Now the federal government's social distancing guidelines have lapsed. State governments like California are under pressure to ease restrictions, all while cases keep growing. More than 30 states are lifting restrictions over the weekend, including Texas, where restaurants and retailers are operating at 25% capacity. While in Washington,
we're going to be having some really incredible results.
And old drugs offering new hope. Antiviral medication remdesivir given emergency approval to help COVID patients.
That has really seemed to be the key to him coming around.
Early results suggest patients who took the drug improved 31% faster than those taking a placebo.
So Liberal states, which were also hit hardest in the beginning, shut down in a much more strict lockdown to what I lived in Australia. The year later, I was here for the 2021 lockdown in Australia. It was incredibly strict in New York, California, those sorts of states. You have to remember only half of Americans were ever in lockdown. Some states never locked down. And I had a bizarre experience where I was sent from LA, complete lockdown, got to the LAX in 10 minutes, never happens, flew to Florida and got there late and thought, well, I just won't have food tonight because how am I going to get food? And saw a bar open and I thought, oh, maybe they're doing takeaway. Went over, there were just people having beers at the bar, and it was like going to an alternate universe because by then I'd been locked up for 3 months or so. And then a week later, I think Florida was the new hotspot. There were just states that just didn't do it. They just refused to. They didn't even consider it. And that's, again, why I think Americans live such different lives in COVID. The impact on jobs and the economy and health was so different because obviously the states that locked down had more of an economic impact, but perhaps a better outcome health-wise than these states that didn't and saw these huge spreads and spikes in deaths. You could go out one day and get yelled at for not wearing a mask and go out the next and get yelled at for wearing one. And you would know based on who was yelling at you which party they backed, basically.
Big signs to make a big point about testing.
We have met the moment. And we have prevailed. We've prevailed on testing is what I'm referring to. That was with regard to testing.
Donald Trump insisting there's enough available to help reopen workplaces, just as his own is exposed to coronavirus.
I don't think the system broke down at all. One person tested positive, surprisingly, because the previous day tested negative. It can happen. It's the hidden enemy.
Officials scrambling to check who the Vice President's infected aide had been in contact with. 3 top health officials and a state governor now taking precautions as White House staffers are told to wear masks.
Yeah, I did. I required it.
Donald Trump accused some states of not being aggressive enough when it comes to restarting their economies, as here in New York, the governor outlined plans that would see some parts of the state start getting back to normal within days.
In California, Elon Musk defying a local government order, tweeting, "Tesla is restarting production today against Alameda County rules. I will be on the line with everyone else. If anyone is arrested, I ask that it only be me." As the US death toll passes 80,000, the president was asked why he keeps touting America's testing.
Maybe that's a question you should ask China.
Sir, why are you saying that to me specifically?
I'm telling you, I'm not saying it specifically to anybody.
There were more questions, but the testing was over.
He's the face of America's coronavirus fight, but Anthony Fauci and Donald Trump are on different pages.
Look, he wants to play all sides of the equation.
Disputing the White House infectious disease experts' warning that it was too soon to ease the lockdown.
If you think that we have it completely under control, we don't.
I was surprised by his answer, actually, because, it's just... To me, it's not an acceptable answer.
The call for caution on schools particularly clashing with the president's economic plan.
You can be driving to school and some bad things can happen too.
America's central bank, the Federal Reserve, today outlined its plan, calling for additional stimulus to avoid a long-lasting recession.
This reversal of economic fortune has caused a level of pain that is hard to capture in words.
As the president labelled the latest $4.7 trillion proposal,
DOA. Dead on arrival.
Almost all states have started easing restrictions. Here in Los Angeles, the city reopening its beaches for the first time in 6 weeks as car maker Tesla prevailed in its standoff to reopen its factory. Billionaire owner Elon Musk had threatened to move the company's headquarters if he didn't get the green light to open. Taking aim.
They should have never let this happen.
Laying blame.
It was either stupidity, incompetence, or it was deliberate.
Just months after signing a new trade deal.
The ink was barely dry, and the plague came over, and it doesn't feel the same to me.
The new threat, his strongest yet.
We could cut off the whole relationship. Now, if you did, what would happen? You'd save $500 billion.
Asked about his relationship with Xi Jinping.
Right now, I don't want to speak to him.
But Beijing had plenty to say. State media labelling the commander-in-chief a giant baby on the brink of a meltdown, who was bluffing and acting tough toward China to win more support, warning severing ties may put world peace in a dangerous position.
Right now, I'm president of the United States. I'm not president of the world. I say it all the time. I want to make America great again.
But America's domestic response is also under the microscope.
Our window of opportunity is closing.
The government's former vaccine chief claiming he raised the alarm early this year about a shortage of ventilators, testing swabs and masks.
I'll never forget the emails I received. And he said, "We're in deep the world is, and we need to act."
Rick Bright says his warnings were dismissed, and so was he.
I don't know him. I never met him. I don't want to meet him, but I watched him, and he looks like an angry, disgruntled employee.
Disgruntled or not, Dr. Bright left Washington with a dire prediction that the COVID-19 pandemic will only get worse here if the United States doesn't develop a national testing strategy.
Time is running out because the virus is still spreading everywhere.
The land of the free. In day 4 of anarchy. Atlanta, CNN headquarters and police under attack.
Threw something on fire, Chris, a firecracker. Yep. Something's on fire.
Nick, you all right?
Police cars smashed, torched. Shops looted. The National Guard called in. Los Angeles, a single officer set upon trying to make an arrest.
The mob starts beating the officer. Look at that officer by himself there.
Dragged out, he collapses. Tonight, downtown shops are being looted. In Washington, the White House briefly on lockdown. Crowds surge barricades, delivering fury to the president's front door. A nationwide fire, and where the first match was lit,
George Floyd!
Minneapolis looks like and feels like an active battleground. It's almost 8 o'clock at night here, so a citywide curfew is about to go into effect. But as you can see, these protesters are showing no signs of letting up. They're now firing, throwing projectiles at these police officers, and they're retreating.
Minnesota State Patrol, you are in violation of unlawful assembly.
Facing off against the National Guard, tear gas fills the street. It escalates quickly in front of us. In a matter of minutes, this went from a peaceful protest to absolute chaos. All of these demonstrators are marching
because they have pushed back the National Guard.
A major development just hours earlier, not enough.
Here to announce that former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin is in custody.
The officer at the centre of it all charged with third-degree murder and manslaughter. For almost 9 minutes, Officer Derek Chauvin had his knee on George Floyd's neck as he pleaded, becoming unresponsive. But for another 2 minutes and 53 seconds, the officer kept holding him down. His charges identical to those against now jailed Minneapolis officer Mohammed Noor, who shot dead an Australian.
The Hennepin County Attorney's Office is one of the few prosecutor offices in this country in the last 5 years to successfully prosecute a police officer for murder. And we did that on behalf of Justine Damon.
George Floyd and Derek Chauvin both worked security at the same nightclub. Staff say they would have crossed paths. Chauvin's wife publicly announcing today she's filed for divorce. But no charges yet for the other officers involved seen holding Mr. Floyd down.
The family of George is entitled to justice, and the people of Minnesota are entitled to live in safety.
If you want change in America, go and register to vote. You are disgracing our city. We are better than this.
One arrest here only escalated tension.
And telling me why I'm under arrest, sir.
Right now.
There was a fear there, even just within my family, that I would not come out of that the same as how I went in.
Fear ingrained in black families for generations.
Even the things that we've taught them don't seem to work.
Many hope the anger will be heard, but change is a long, distant hope.
So basically it was another case of police brutality. In this case, it was an African-American man in Minneapolis who was arrested and restrained by a police officer who held his knee on his throat. And famously, his last words were, "I can't breathe," as he was held like that for 9 minutes and eventually died. It was outrageous when we first heard about it, but unfortunately not that uncommon to hear of. But it was when the vision came out and watching the full 9 minutes and seeing how long that man was restrained for, saying he couldn't breathe, he was calling for his mother. It was horrific to watch. It was an incredibly upsetting and harrowing vision. And once America saw that, it exploded. So Minneapolis exploded almost immediately. I remember scrambling to get crews there through the night because it was already almost exploding. There were riots, shops were getting looted, buildings were on fire, police cars were getting rocks thrown at them. There was, pepper spray being used in crowds. We were convinced people were going to die in these riots as well. And we also hadn't seen riots at this scale for such a long time in the United States. At the start, it very much felt like a Minneapolis riot, and then it did not take long to spring up in other places. I remember New York was pretty soon after, again, a liberal state, eventually LA, and then by the end, it was everywhere. I can't describe to you what it was like. There were 3 of us covering the US trying to work out where to be, this huge country, and it felt like every capital city in every state was on fire.
The land of the free, and people are running wild. An Amazon delivery van ransacked this LA jewelry store a target, so too these white women.
Don't spray stuff on here when they gonna blame black people for this.
A protest hijacked and people aren't standing for it.
That's not our message. That's not helping nothing.
Others, though, helping themselves to whatever they could carry.
This store had already been completely looted. Another one was being attacked here. That's what helped spark this response we've just seen within minutes. We've got sheriff's officers in full riot gear. Just beyond them, firefighters have just arrived to deal with a building on fire there. And we even have a Bearcat, an armoured vehicle in place here, and so many police and authorities to try and bring control back to this part of Santa Monica.
Shop owners frustrated, but ultimately understanding.
At least 100 people have passed by. They all have stopped and said, "We are sorry."
In Washington, handshakes and respect from a president called on to calm the nation. Tweets, law and order, fake news, and this. The United States of America will be designating Antifa as a terrorist organization. Antifa anti-fascists, the hard left, Trump's target for blame.
Radical militants that are coming out under cover of night, traveling across state lines,
using military-style tactics to burn down our cities.
With the president in lockdown, his November opponent, Joe Biden, met with potential voters.
You gotta get that crazy guy out of office, buddy. Right? Save us. Save us, please. Yes.
But right now, the leaders are on the streets. A police chief kneeling in California, Solidarity 2 in Kansas City and New Jersey. Moments of unity, of hope.
I took my helmet off and laid the batons down. I want to make this a parade, not a protest.
That was a historic moment where people's fears were listened to and actions were behind it. And that was the turning point.
And from the family of George Floyd, one question asked live on air to the boss of the 4 officers whose actions sparked the unrest.
I want to know if he's going to get justice for my brother and arrest all the officers.
And this is the Floyd family right now?
This is the Floyd family.
To the Floyd family, being silent or not intervening, to me, you're complicit.
I was in Florida working and I got moved up to Washington, D.C. I was the closest there. So I arrived, I think 1 or 2 days after Minneapolis had happened. The 1st of June, when we came out, again, the streets were just already packed. We just naturally fell into a march that was going from the White House to the Capitol. So we joined that march, stayed at the Capitol for quite some time, and then it felt like it was just an organic impromptu movement that turned around and went back to the White House. So we walked back. A curfew of 7 p.m. had been announced that day because the last night was so extraordinary. So basically at nightfall, full curfew, everyone had to be inside. We were expecting to still be on air for sunrise at 7 and we were doing our 6 p.m. cross, which I think was about 8 a.m. here. And you could see the police gathering, didn't think much of it, of course. The curfew is about to be enforced. We were standing to the side with all the other media, exact same spot we had been the night before when we watched the police move through and enforce the curfews. We had no reason to expect that we would be in any way targeted or become a part of what was happening. Your goal as a journalist, as the media, is to never become a part of the story. It's the one thing you do not do. And at no point did we think that that was what was going to happen. All of a sudden, as I was on air, I could hear kind of yelling and movement. And again, we just were not expecting it because it was not time yet. And in my head, I kept thinking it's too early. You know, it must just be a kerfuffle. There must be some protesters, you know, getting in the way of each other or something. And then all of a sudden, just the wall of police came and turned. I still remember them turning to look at us and me thinking, not us, go that way.
Outside the White House, 30 minutes before curfew, police begin their attack.
We've just had to run about a block as police moved in. We've been fired at with rubber bullets. My cameraman has been hit. We've also seen tear gas being used. Here we go, they're moving through again. This is exactly what it looks like. Exactly what it looks like. We're to stay safely. Media!
And now they're...
Gosh.
You see
That's
what's
a photographer.
What's going on now?
A member of the press.
Now there's just a lot of violence erupting.
Hit with a shield in the stomach, a punch to the lens. Another officer lashes out with a baton as we run, trying to get out of an early surge.
Because of that happening, we got effectively pushed into the stampede. So we were then in with the protesters when the idea was we were meant to be observing and reporting from the sidelines. And because of that, I was getting hit with rubber bullets. I was getting hit with pepper spray. There were these horrible things called pepper balls that they were just firing into the crowd. And they fire them at the bottom of your legs, so you can't stand still, basically. So they're pelting the back of your legs. But when they open, pepper spray comes out. So you can barely breathe. It's chaos. We're stuck in this crowd. And meanwhile, I'm still on air. You heard us yelling there that we were media, but they don't care. They are being indiscriminate at the moment. They chased us down that street, and as you see, they were firing these rubber bullets at everyone. There is tear gas, and now we are really surrounded by the police, and you really saw the way that they dealt with my cameraman, Tim. They're quite violent, and they do not care who they're targeting at the moment. I felt like every time I got up to say something, I got knocked over again or hit with something else, and you just pop back up and keep speaking. But the police just weren't stopping because that was their move. They were pushing the people out. So our main goal was we had to get out of there, but also finish our report. So you can see the vision of us. We're trying to get down low to get through this incredible crowd, but it just felt like we were completely stuck.
Hands up! Don't shoot!
The president is watching this and minutes from addressing his nation.
We're moving back,
Amelia, we're going to go low and across the street there, okay?
Yeah.
On my shoulder.
Yeah.
With the crowd as we're driven blocks back, people around us have hands in the air as tear gas flies.
Eventually we got through and around a corner, and that was when I actually finally could turn to the camera and explain what had happened and how indiscriminate the police were being. If you think that they hit us with a microphone and a camera, you can just imagine what they were doing to some of these protesters who were still not breaking the law. It was still not the curfew. We took a minute to gather our breath, and then police on horseback came around the corner that we'd turned in, so we had to run again. We ended up sheltering in a shop that the window had been smashed out. We got inside and kind of let the crowds run past us.
4 minutes later, Donald Trump in the Rose Garden.
All Americans were rightly sickened and revolted by the brutal death of George Floyd.
The sound of tear gas canisters behind him.
I will fight to protect you. I am your president of law and order.
Night 7 of riots, the commander-in-chief came with an arsenal.
We will end it now. Today I have strongly recommended to every governor to deploy the National Guard in sufficient numbers that we dominate the streets. If a city or state refuses to take the actions that are necessary to defend the life and property of their residents, then I will deploy the United States military and quickly solve the problem for them.
A president vowing anarchists will be squashed.
These are acts of domestic terror, the destruction of innocent life, and the spilling of innocent blood is an offense to humanity and a crime against God. And now I'm going to pay my respects to a very, very special place. Thank you very much.
Just minutes after he finished,
A citywide curfew is in effect. 7 p.m. tonight.
police clear the street. A rally tear-gassed. Military police with rubber bullets.
This was a peaceful protest until just now. Peaceful protest!
Forcibly cleared out.
I have no doubt that they knew we were media. In the least, we had camera equipment. We were screaming media repeatedly, and we were standing with the media. That's why there's such good vision of what happened. We were surrounded by the world's media, and all of a sudden they just turned on us. I think the fact it was live on air helped. I just had to keep speaking. I'm also thinking of my parents back home watching and thinking, you've got to get back up. They've got to see you get back up, or they'll be terrified. Also, my husband was working in Minneapolis. I was out of contact with him because he'd been arrested at gunpoint. Our lives were falling apart, and I'm thinking, if he doesn't see me get back up, he's going to be beside himself. It was just an incredible moment to live through. Once we got out of the crowd ourselves, the crowd we never wanted to be in, we did feel a lot more safe. We ran a few more blocks, unfortunately in the opposite direction to our hotel, so we ended up very far away. By then, Donald Trump had walked out to the area we had been standing, and he was posing with the Bible. And I'm getting told that, I can't see any vision at this stage, I'm getting told that through my ear, and I'm thinking that's what that was. That's why they cleared it so quickly and aggressively and early. It was for that.
Silenced as right on curfew, the president appeared, leaving the White House grounds.
Mr. President, your thoughts right now?
He crossed the street for the Church of the Presidents and, before a boarded-up building, held up a Bible.
It won't take long. It's not going to take long.
Calling in his team for a photo.
We have the greatest country in the world. Thank you very much, everybody. We're going to keep it nice and safe.
He sanctioned the use of tear gas by police officers in riot gear to clear the church yard. I am outraged. I just can't believe what my eyes have seen tonight.
On an earlier phone call, he'd blasted state governors as weak.
You're going to look like a bunch of jerks. Just to dominate.
Democrat states have already rejected his military offer.
A force on the ground is both unsustainable militarily, it's also unsustainable socially because it's the antithesis of how we live.
The National Guard now already on White House grounds, and at least 23 states rallies into the night under close watch.
My main outrage was not just how we were treated, obviously exercising our First Amendment right to a free press, which is something that Americans hold very dear. The fact that we got treated like that, I think, illustrated how badly some of those protesters were treated. I'm not saying they were all doing the right thing. I did see people throw water bottles. I saw people antagonize police, absolutely. I didn't see anyone do anything that warranted how hard some of those people were hit or how badly they were treated. And at the end of the day, they came in early. If that had have happened at 7 p.m, maybe we would all look back at it with a different viewpoint, because everyone was told at 7 p.m. it's illegal for you to be here. But it wasn't 7 p.m. yet. And you can even hear that on our tape. I say repeatedly, it's too early. They've come in too early, thinking it's some sort of mistake, and then realizing that it wasn't. It was very intentional. It was a photo op.
Whoa!
Hours after curfew, police attacked. Looters beaten and rounded up by protesters. Lockdowns ignored in the face of immense force in the capital. It is now after curfew, but the only police that we can see are behind this fence. On the other hand, we've seen hundreds of protesters flooding the scene, wanting to be here for this moment. Before a fortified Lincoln Memorial and a padlocked White House. The crowd is defiant as night came, facing off against a wall of arms. We're not leaving! Who start firing through the fence on those who won't leave. Hollywood Boulevard. Police surge early, standing on the stars. National Guard boots on the Walk of Fame and Sunset Boulevard. Reporter Paul Caddock there as lockdown loomed.
Again, how quickly things can change. Just a few minutes after Hollywood Boulevard was full of protesters, peaceful protesters, something has happened, and now it is full of police.
I can't breathe! I can't breathe!
As curfews rolled across the country, city after city rallied back. From Broadway to Portland, protesters filled streets. And tonight, for hours, peaceful marchers were left to move. New York's 11 p.m. curfew last night, disastrously late. America's largest police department lost control.
The NYPD and the mayor did not do their job last night. Look at the videos. It was a disgrace. I believe that.
Tonight, lockdown came at 8. New York's refused the National Guard, choosing to stamp out violence itself. Shifting tactics, mostly avoiding combat, the night after President Trump threatened military domination. Today, he drove past protesters on his way to another religious moment at the shrine of St. Paul II. With the First Lady, a photo opportunity slammed by religious leaders for a second day.
The President held up the Bible at St. John's Church yesterday. I just wish he opened it once in a while.
Asked to comment on his neighbour's violence, Canada's Prime Minister took 20 long seconds to find the words.
We all watch in horror and consternation what's going on in the United States.
Into the night, police rounded up lawbreakers.
They're just going one person at a time.
It's not over, but night 8 is the calmest so far.
I was subpoenaed as part of an investigation into, it was called the Lafayette Square incident, so exactly what happened in that moment. So not the broader protests over the week, just that moment where that square was cleared for the photo op. It was myself, a priest from the church where Donald Trump held up the Bible, a protester, and then the Republicans had called a legal expert basically to say whether what the police had done was unlawful or not. It was terrifying. This was still a country that was incredibly polarised. My face had been plastered all over the news for weeks with vision of me getting hit, constantly used. I was getting death threats and abuse on Twitter. There was real concerns about me going back to DC and just being out in public, let alone walking into Congress. But also it was an important story to tell. That's what I was there for that day, was to report what happened, and I wasn't going to let that opportunity be taken away from me. Also, meanwhile, the Australian government had called for a full investigation, had registered its unhappiness with what had happened. I didn't think it was fair to ask for an investigation, then when they do one, not show up to tell them what happened.
As a reporter, I have no interest in becoming the story, but over recent weeks, many of us have been left with no choice. I've been shocked to see how many journalists have been attacked, beaten and detained just for doing their jobs.
The attack on the Australian journalists appeared entirely unjustified and unlawful.
So, like all things, it took some time, but even on the day that the lawyer for the Republicans conceded that the police, in the least with their treatment of us, had acted unlawfully. It was then found that they had, on a whole, acted unlawfully that day by moving in early, and that the warnings that they claimed were given were not given. I guess because I lived through it, I couldn't see any other result as a reasonable person. I think it was nice for something to officially say that we didn't do anything wrong. We weren't in the wrong place. We weren't trying to get attention, because it's something that people wanted to say about us, and we don't stand there. And you think that's where we were told to stand. We were doing the right thing. So for them to come out and say, actually, you were doing entirely the right thing. You were standing where you were supposed to. You were doing exactly what you'd done the night before and nothing happened. And it was those 2 police officers who acted unlawfully by turning on you. There was some vindication in that.
USA! 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 USA!